Thank you, everybody. I'm in the midst of reading a very provocative book, and I just wanted to share a few passages from it. It's called Against Civility, the Hidden Racism in Our Obsession with Civility. So right off the bat, it's a provocative title, it's a provocative theme. You'd think we're all in favor of civility. But this excellent author, Alex Zamalin, has really gone deep into this question and looked at it historically. Here are a few passages. He says, we're told the most effective way to oppose Trump and save the soul of our nation is to be politer, less raucous and embittered, more compassionate and rule-abiding, more responsible in our choices and empathetic in our dialogue. Don't be too disruptive and unruly in the streets. Play by the rules of the game. Look to compromise when you can. Don't rock the boat. Don't be too loud. Stop being so angry. Listen to the police and obey their orders. Follow the law at all times. He goes on, civility sounds like a good thing. If we think about our daily lives and our relationships with neighbors and friends, the word suggests warmth and affection, forgiveness and humility, the good manners, things to which we aspire. In truth, most people don't want to come off as rude or impolite at a dinner party, on the sidewalk, on the street corner. But politics isn't everyday life. Politics is about organizing the competing interests within a community, distributing socioeconomic resources, making determinations about whose lives matter and whose don't. Politics is about parties struggling to win elections, social movements trying to press the ruling class for greater freedom, politicians signing bills into law that affect how much we pay in taxes, who ends up going to jail, and what kinds of schools our children go to. This is an arena of power and struggle. Once we think about politics in this way, we need to ask ourselves, does civility take us one step closer to our goal of liberation for all people? Does it sway politicians to make sweeping changes in public policy? Is it something to which we should aspire in public life as we do with our friends and neighbors? We can speculate about these questions abstractly, but the best way to answer them is by looking to similar struggles in the past. History teaches us what has worked and what hasn't. It is a record of success and failure from which we have much to learn. This book's purpose is to track the history of the relationship between civility and anti-Black racism in the United States to see what lessons it might have for us today. When we do this, a clearer picture emerges, as surprising as it is unsettling. Civility is a central term through which racial inequality has been maintained. Civility is a central term. Civility is exalted in the language of slave owners, segregationists, lynch mobs, and eugenicists. It is also enshrined in the language of free marketeers and preachers of fiscal responsibility. And surprisingly, it is elevated in the language of well-intentioned liberals, self-described moderates, and devout progressives. All of them traffic in ideas about public etiquette to declare what counts as good citizenship and what doesn't. From slavery to Jim Crow, to Black ghettoization, to mass incarceration, to police brutality, the idea of civility has been enlisted to treat Black suffering with apathy or to maintain an unjust status quo. Worse, it has been a tool for silencing dissent, repressing political participation, enforcing economic inequality, and justifying violence upon people of color. Civility hasn't been the organizing principle of the most successful anti-racist thinkers and movements who've sought to dismantle US racism. They discovered over and over again that real political change happens through direct struggle without obligation to decorum or propriety. Creating real political change requires us to confront unequal institutions rather than simply point out bad behavior. Shocking and provoking people, no matter how impolite the words or actions might seem, is necessary to wake the majority of people from their moral slumber. Disobeying unjust laws and taking disruptive action puts pressure on the levers of political, cultural, social, and economic power. And that pressure is what moves ruling elites to take notice and come to the negotiating table. And I'll conclude with two more quotes. All of these tactics are part of an orientation I call civic radicalism, which is a key to fighting racism. We can find this way of thinking and behaving in major anti-racist activists across US history. Everyone from Frederick Douglass to David Walker, John Brown, Harriet Tubman, from W.E.B. Du Bois and Ida B. Wells to Martin Luther King, James Baldwin, Malcolm X, and Andre Lorde, and from the students of the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee to Black feminists, labor activists, peace activists, and Black Lives Matter today. Finally, all of these figures and movements turned away from civility when the stakes were highest. They knew civility had no role in the fight to gain freedom for the marginalized. Here's why civic radicalism is superior to civility as a political approach. A politics based on civility makes agreement among participants the prerequisite for political thought, whereas civic radicalism begins with the goal of liberation for all, regardless of who disagrees. Civility politics champions stability, but civic radicalism questions who counts in the public sphere and who doesn't, whose lives matter and whose don't. Civic radicalism unsettles what civility assumes has long been settled, the kind of community we are and want to be. So those are just a few of the passages in the opening chapter of this book. It is a very tough book to read. It pushes against many of our common assumptions, especially, I'll say, in an interfaith and religious setting. But it's worth studying, it's worth reading and thinking about. And that's why in the midst of reading it, and I'll probably write a book review, I wanted to share it with you. If you're inclined, I encourage you to track down Against Civility, the hidden racism in our obsession with civility. Thanks for listening this morning.